Hey, Bruiser buddies, this is Wrestling Nostalgia with Dave Dynasty.
Before we dive into the episode, make sure you hit subscribe on the podcast platform you're listening on. Also, follow me on X at The Dave Dynasty and subscribe on YouTube by looking up Nostalgic Dave Dynasty. You can also buy one of my shirts at ProWrestlingTees.com/The Dave Dynasty. Now, enjoy the show.
Welcome to 1 hour of the toughest, roughest wrestling you'll ever see.
That's right, Dick the Bruiser said it all.
The big question, have you got the endurance? Have you got the brains to get past the excellence of execution?
Just they think they got the answers. I change the questions.
This is Jim Cornette, and the views that I'm about to express are not necessarily those of anybody else but me, but they ought to be, and as a matter of fact, they probably are.
The reason why Axe and myself were put on this earth is to demolish people.
Bobby Heenan, is a very good-looking sport coat you've got on.
Yeah, and I paid for mine. Mine isn't government issue.
Hello, everybody. Lance Russell and Dave Brown right along ringside. By golly, we're ready to go with another big week of championship wrestling.
Greetings, wrestling fans, and welcome to Wrestling Nostalgia. I'm your host, Dave Dynasty. Thank you for joining me for another episode. I apologize for missing a week or two here lately, just with scheduling and the way I've been feeling. It's just been chaotic. But we are back with a very strong episode this week. My guest is Mike Lano, wrestling photographer, writer, and historian. You all know the name. And we talk about wrestling history, the WFIA, Dick the Bruiser, Japan, Los Angeles, so much more. This is a great conversation. And that's what it is, right? It's not an interview. It's a conversation. It's just two wrestling fans chatting. You're going to love it. You're going to enjoy it. So let's take a break. And when we come back, we'll have my interview with Mike Lano. If you like horror movies, be sure to check out Dave Dynasty and Ike Isaacs on the Listen to Their Screams Horror Podcast. It is available on all podcast platforms and on social media at Listen to Screams. That is Listen, the number 2, and Screams. All right, and welcome back to Wrestling Nostalgia. This time I'm being joined by noted wrestling photographer, writer, and historian, Dr. Mike Lano. Doctor, how are you?
I'm doing pretty good. As I told you, had to pull an all-nighter on photos, which I used to do with my dear pal who was closer to George Napolitano and Bob Mulren, who we lost about 2-3 years ago to esophageal cancer. But we would shoot wrestling stuff, like if we were rooming together for a WrestleMania, and then we go back to, the room after we ate all kinds of junk food and crap we shouldn't be eating, and Photoshop and clean up all our photos and then rush them out to Japan or whoever our vendors were, whether it was the 2 European magazines. We don't have a lot of newsstand magazines left. We lost Wrestle Talk a couple of months ago. So now it's in the UK, which they do sell at Barnes & Noble, Inside the Ropes, which is excellent. Yep. There's PWI in this country. I think we're down to just Boxy Lucha in Mexico, and then Shukan Pro Baseball. Shukan means weekly in Japanese in Japan, and that's like it. There used to be Tudo Ludi in Italy. That my old editor Bill Apter, he was also editor for, got me the gig working for him, but they only put out X amount of issues. But the territories are my thing. I think I told you, I at the latter part of my career in life, and I absolutely, that was my bucket list. Was trying to shoot as many of the territories, particularly in the 70s, with the golden era. And I live for that now. It's weird when I hear people calling, as I contribute to the Busted Open channel history and stuff like that, but when they call a current promotion like AEW territory, I never correct them. But I go, it ain't a territory. No. It is a company. Tony Khan has a company, but it isn't a territory in the classic sense of Eddie Graham, or Dick the Bruiser's WWE. Have I told you this story? And then I'll shut up and let you ask away. That's how the WWA name of Dick the Bruiser, I'm sure you already know this, But Bruiser refused to drop the strap back after an unusual but an absolutely fun heel series with Blassie in Los
In
Angeles
Los Angeles, yeah. Uh-huh.
in the World Wrestling Association. That was Cal Eaton with Jules Strongbow, who kind of, if you know that history there, that's the real Jules Strongbow, the one that
Yeah.
Vince Sr. named Chief Frank Hill, who became the Strongbow brother in the later 70s with all the tag straps.
Right.
And he was a legit Native American, but that wasn't his name. Jules Strongbow was just in deference to our former wrestler, California legend, and one of the greatest booking minds ever, up there with Eddie Graham and so many others, Gagne and Roy Shire and stuff. But Bruiser wouldn't drop the strap. So I'm making this short. It wasn't the Bearcat Wright refusing to drop the strap as well back to Blassie. And Bearcat was a babyface, whatever year that was, 62 or 64. But Blassie had this series, and he actually met other heels in LA, like Dick Byers, the Destroyer. But then he met, worked with Carpentier and some others that were faces, Bobo, obviously. But Bruiser pulled a Stan Hansen or the reverse, took the belt with him, wouldn't drop it back to Fred, started his own company in Indianapolis, then has one of the greatest territory wars ever in Detroit against the Sheik. It was Bruiser's WWA. But I think he finally sent the belt back, but it wasn't destroyed, to Jules Strongbow, then the booker and the guy that really ran the office, because Cal Eaton knew not that much about wrestling in Los Angeles. And that was Eileen Eaton's second husband. And, you know, so my home base territories, primarily, for those of you who may not know, LA was my home base, shooting mainly for our program, and ringside and backstage. I was one of the few ballsy enough, because I hardly saw Theo Ehret, who was my sensei trainer, go back there. He was, the king and the man. I wasn't the only ringside photographer. There were others like Phil Miller. Theo was the king. Thankfully, he taught me all he knew. But if an NWA world champion was coming in, like Dory or Terry, I would go down there and make sure I took pose to them in the tiny dressing room we had downstairs. Roy Shire, San Francisco, was my secondary home base, and I was the only photographer for his program that was listed in there. But then, I started traveling all the territories, and Japan, Mexico, Canada, and blah, blah, blah. So let me shut up and let you ask.
That's okay. You jumped right into what I was going to start with. And that is, right, the roots of the WWA that I know in Indianapolis or in LA. And even when Bruiser won that title from Blassie, it ran in the Indianapolis Star and News, the picture of him with the LA belt. That was a big deal in Indianapolis. And then just like, him and Wilbur Snyder won the AWA tag titles and started defending them as a WWA tag title. He just segued it all into his own promotion, him and Wilbur. But
did you know if Bruiser met Wilbur prior to coming to LA? Because Wilbur was a great babyface in LA at the time when we had Lord James Blears and Gene Kiniski as the tag champs, Wilbur with various partners like Pepper Gomez, who ended up living 3 blocks from me in Northern California in Alameda. Long story, long history there. When Joe Pepper passed away, we looked after his widow, Bonnie. But a lot of great memories, and I should try to get you photos of Pepper's house. He had a ton framed on the wall of his time with Bruiser, as well as obviously in the AWA and Australia and all the other places Pepper worked. In fact, Pepper took, what was the gimmick? It started in San Francisco for Shire, where Pepper, to prove he had the greatest cast iron stomach, up on the ladder, dive onto his belly. And then it was Ray Stevens, who then did it on his neck intentionally, famous knee drop, and set that up. But in Australia, Pepper reworked it, and I can't remember, it was somebody from Bruiser's WWA, but they had Wilbur, Pepper, and Bruiser had a long friendship. So do you know if Wilbur, where did Bruiser meet Wilbur? Was it prior to Los Angeles? WWE?
I'm not 100% sure. I'm assuming it was in LA.
Yeah,
that's what I've always assumed, right? And I've always been fascinated by that partnership, because Bruiser and Snyder seem like complete opposites. And when you talk to a lot of the talent, that's what it was, right? Bruiser was he was a little more high strung, a little more energetic. Snyder was a little more laid back. And it just worked, right? They kind of balanced with each other.
Well, who was it with Wilbur? Sometimes when guys would say my envelope came up short, Wilbur would then sort of defer to
Yeah,
Bruiser and say, "Well, that's because Dick."
yeah, yeah,
But it might have been. But Wilbur was a notorious, and I have great respect, up to today with Mick Foley or Angelo Poffo when you hear these guys because I was around Jerry Graham a lot
yeah.
towards the latter part of his career. A lot of us would look in on him. He had a shitty little, it was like 20 by 30 feet,
Oh,
crap apartment. It was
yeah,
awful towards the end. He was working in front of 35, 40 people in bad parts of LA, gigging and et cetera, and managing, and then sometimes in his wheelchair. But
yeah,
he was, most notorious, but so many would blow their money. But Wilbur, and Bruiser were skinflints, but you have to respect that because if they're supporting their families and they're always looking out, there's that aspect of it. They weren't blowing their money like a Jerry Graham or somebody ostentatious.
yeah,
They were focused on supporting the family and making sure they had money for health stuff because most of these guys, you'd see them at Cauliflower Alley when I started going in 87, 88, and you felt awful for some of these great legends that had nothing.
yeah,
They had nothing and they didn't know how to tap into, and maybe Social Security and Medicare weren't, paying the bills and taking care of everything as they sort of have been for the last 25, 30 years, maybe not quite now or to a lesser extent. But you have to respect that. And, Mick Foley with what he's got the four kids and
hmm
Colette and multiple puppies and stuff. Uh, so I respect guys that are cautious and are thinking future forward. So anyway, I'll shut up about that. But it's like I always kind of cringe when I hear, oh yeah, somebody says, oh Wilbur, what a cheapskate. No, but I mean, if you're shorting somebody, that's a whole different subject.
yeah,
If you both of you know what the guy should have gotten in his envelope and he doesn't get that, then there's a problem.
yeah. Well, and it's funny to think if some of these guys, you just shift them a decade or two forward, and you look at now, right? There's all these independent toy companies making action figures, and all these options to make merchandise. It's cheap and easy now, right? It's a lot more convenient now. And to think with some of these guys who maybe died, were big stars but died penniless, pretty much, that they could have had a nostalgic resurgence if it had just been a little bit into the future, right? In that with convention appearances and doing some T-shirts or whatnot.
I can't tell you the guys that I say, like, thankfully I talked to Coco a couple of years ago about doing some of these things like WrestleCons, and he's doing them, but mostly close to home. But a lot of guys aren't like John Tatum, for example.
Yeah,
And I keep saying, here is Mike B's number for high spots. It is the ethical Amazon for pro wrestling, anything and everything. The guy puts on ethical conventions.
yeah,
And if you want to ask me about unethical, the worst stuff I ever saw, because I eventually was on the board at WFIA, which is Wrestling Fans International, when Cauliflower
sure.
Alley was not allowing any marks in. It was only the boys, and it wasn't like the awards thing. Now it's skewed to where it's like almost more than 80%
Yeah,
fans,
sure.
and if you even get 10 to 15, 20% talent, like Bret Hart is coming next month. He's one
Right.
of our top honorees, Natty's
Yeah.
giving him the Lou Thez Award. But some of these guys, they're not aware of that. So that's why I was thrilled. And so you might know the status. I haven't heard any buzz from Greg Gagne and Magnum TA on their Legends
Oh,
figures, which were amazing at
yeah.
first and second batch. I haven't heard. So are they continuing with it? Because some of the boys could get some dough that are still alive that
It
deserve it.
is. That is such a controversy right now because apparently no one knows. Because I've got a couple of the first series figures and they're amazing. And then I ordered a couple like the Bobo Brazil one that they did in that Remco stuff. But now it's like I don't think Gagne and TA are associated with Power Town anymore. Now I
Oh,
don't keep
wow.
up on it as much, but I don't know, there's a lot of controversy about Power Town right now. And
And, and then and then you look at AEW severed ties with their toy maker. Those ones
yeah,
were great, because I'm a
yes,
collector. I
yeah,
have, I think I told you the Titanus in El Ring, the
yeah,
1975-ish, and prior to that, which was a guilty pleasure. It was so bad. It was good.
It's
But you look at, I thought at the time, I told the Sheik, I go, they're kind of stealing your gimmick. They have like everybody's a character. And this is pre-Vince, obviously
sure.
pre-Vince. They have like an LP with everybody's entrance music. I
Yeah.
mean, what, 12 years before Vince did it,
Yeah.
or maybe even more, because it was only those first two albums from WWF 80s. They weren't guys' entrance music. It was actual unique songs. But the Tiny Tennis in El Ring, they had action figures. I think it's either all or New Japan. I'd have to dig up in storage, had action figures, just a few, like four that you get from gumball machines in Japan in like 1979,
Yeah.
way before any of the other stuff. So I still collect them. I watch. So what is the scandal where people were orders not being fulfilled? Do you know what the scandal is?
Correct. There was a lot of pre-orders, obviously for some upcoming series that have not been met. There was always I don't know. I don't want to point fingers. I don't know because I don't follow it closely.
But I thought that was so awesome. The Thez and the Vern
Yeah.
and the Brody
Yes.
and Hanson, great stuff.
Beautiful
I love
figures.
it. Yeah,
Yeah.
beautiful. And some of the oh God, the one outfit that's like the king of, and they've got deals going with Mattel,
Yeah.
and I can't remember the AEW's company, but they had deals with them, and they'll do sort of customs, but
Yeah.
they'll do it in mass quantity, and they're very reliable, very ethical, which is great to see. And it's just it's fun, but we can't park our cars in our garage, our two-car garage. It's actually a three-car garage because I have action figures floor to ceiling, and
Yeah. Yeah. Again, I was so excited because they were going to make a Bobo figure in that Remco, kind of He-Man type style. And yeah, I don't know how long it's been since I pre-ordered that, and it's not been filled. And I don't, I got kind of given up hope, but who knows?
so
Um,
what's going on with the AEW outfit? They're just not going to have action figures now. I don't know why they'd want to drop that
yeah,
because they were a little slow. It was slow to market, as you know. There was like a year lag, and so somebody could no longer be with a company,
yeah.
uh, and then the
I
figure would come out. But they were in high demand, and
Yeah,
now I think the last ones they're way overpriced. For if you
yeah.
wanted to buy them.
I don't know. They were with what it was Jazzware or something like that.
Yeah, that's
But
it, Jazz
yeah,
Whiz. I thought they
and
did a great job. I like
I
the packaging.
yeah, they were great figures, and I don't know. I don't know what happened there, but whatever the agreement, the contract ended, and I'm sure you would think AEW will surely pick up an action figure contract with somebody.
Yeah,
Um,
it's like they shop AEW. I mean, they could be doing so much more. But I'm just happy that the TV's insane. It's like one of the only shows. I don't fast forward NXT, which was one of my other favorites, and Dynamite Collision. How could you fast forward? I mean, the matches you're getting. It's like almost every week now. It's almost like last Wednesday was a total pay-per-view night. Other than the
yeah,
sort of Moxley squash with Will Ospreay.
yeah,
But the Workhorsemen, those guys are fun to watch. Anyway, and the one big guy, the bigger of the two that is featured the last couple of weeks, thankfully they're back. That guy's amazing for his size. He's
sure,
like a Tank Patton or one of these 70s guys that you look at and you go, oh, this guy's not going to be able to do jack shit. And
yeah. Well, I wanted you mentioned WFIA, so let me backtrack to that a little bit because in
okay, yeah. Oh, yeah, conventions.
sure, because I think it was in '82, the WFIA, I think it was '82. That convention was in Indianapolis. Were you there for that convention?
No, that was no longer the true WFA, which was
Okay,
created by
sure.
Don Wilson, who was the first president, Dave Bersinski, who was the Sheik's program
Yep,
maker,
yep,
ringside photographer, later fantastic heel manager, Dave Drayson,
yeah,
Tom Burke.
yeah,
I think George Shire had a hand in it, and then my boss and friend to this day in LA, Jeff Walton. They
yeah,
created it with the thought, and this was going back to like '67 where it was I think it was Detroit was the first place. And each year would be in a different city and
sure,
the office there, depending on the office. But most of the offices like Fritz Von Erichsen, 77, he sent, everybody that was working for him. And then he attended, which was major. The Boston one in 75 when I think that was my first year on the board. when Don Wilson had he was like the head president, but he was like the main guy who started the thing.
Yeah.
And he'd been in an auto accident or something, and his neck was full of pins. So he had to bow out. Mike Ratchner was a noted, you would know him because he
Yep.
promoted
Yep.
first for AWA for Vern, maybe around 77 starting, ringside photographer. Now he's a house show promoter. And then he felt like Vern swapped him over to Bruiser to promote those towns.
Yeah.
And he
Yeah.
was like grousing about that. But I go, well, I mean, that office was loaded with talent too. But you look at, uh, I go off topic a lot, probably because I haven't had any
That's
sleep.
okay. That's
But
okay.
the Bruiser WWA, when he brought it to Detroit, however long that was, two and a
Uh-huh.
half, 3 years against the Sheik,
Yeah.
it's like everybody and anybody, you were either on one or the other show. Kobo Saturday nights, I think Friday at Olympia was Friday. Sheik was Saturday at Kobo, if I'm not
Yeah.
mistaken.
Yeah.
And they were just stacked. It's
Yeah.
just, and they were amazing. Like I would be going out of my mind if I lived there.
Yeah.
Uh,
And both shows
because
drawing amazing numbers.
But you look at one of them, and I can send you the lineup and the ad in the newspaper for it at Kobo.
Yeah.
They brought in guys just to F with the other one.
Sure.
And it's like I don't understand because Smudgnick was very close with Bruiser, who was a headline for
Right.
decades for Sam, yet he's supporting Sheik and he's sending in like Danny Hodge to defend the junior title and Blassie versus Mil Moskowitz. None of those fans had ever seen those guys. X amount knew them from the magazines, but there wasn't the big pop you would get. And those guys like in the openers, and then you have 15, 16 matches. So it was like what we would later see with Dennis Coralluzzo in New Jersey,
Yeah.
a
Yeah.
4 hour 20 bout card, the fans would be exhausted. But WFIA, so you have that, and I was only contrasting that because when I talk about crap conventions around 2006, 2007, then I'll let you go back to your I will defer back to you because you had an original question. That was the worst ripoff conventions. I can go into a little bit of that, capped by the Cow Palace 2007, where a husband and wife who no one had ever heard of, they put on this 3-day convention and they lied to all the boys, legends and otherwise. They had Gabe bring in Ring of Honor, and a bunch of TNA talent came in with Bill Behrens, who insisted they get paid up front in full wisely. They were the only ones that got paid.
Yeah.
This husband and wife team, they claimed that they were former Bay Area cops and that he'd been shot in the line of duty. They had a ton of MMA guys. So they had, the signings during the day and various shows like Ring of Honor. And there was supposed to be an MMA show. But on night 2, Saturday night of the 3 nights, the husband and wife got all the cash boxes, fled, crossed state lines. Some of us that found out about called the cops to try to get them before they did that. I had Billy Graham's, and he was the super agent for others. Scotty Epstein stayed. He flew out from New York and he stayed a couple of days when it was over with, so we could go to the 3 counties to file charges and have them press charges and try to extradite the husband and wife promoter who had like a whole series of names we discovered. But they took the cash boxes, so like nobody got paid. So I went out and warned on Sunday morning. They had no idea of this. Steve Austin, Bill Goldberg, who actually helped me talk to Joni China, that there was like no money. And they all said, well, I'm not going back to the airport. These fans paid. They all went in and did the signings and got like no money. And it was so horrific. The flights home for everybody, they were supposed to fly out the next day, Monday, after the 3 days. All those flights canceled. We're talking everyone from Nick Bockwinkel to Beefcake, Valentine, Piper, and then the hotel for Sunday night was canceled. So I was at another hotel on my own dime as their photographer. Of course, I got a rubber check, but I go in at various times and I see Francine and all this talent sleeping on the hotel lobby on the floor or on the couches or the chairs. It was an effing nightmare. And then really when Mike B took over, it wasn't called at that first WrestleCon in 2005 that I was brought out by Rob Russin to be the photographer for in Tampa, which had way too much talent, like 105 pieces of talent. Then Bockwinkel and I called up Heenan and Pat Patterson, who were, lived nearby, and they'd never been to conventions before. And we got them to come in, and they just got swamped by people. They
Yeah.
were just to have lunch with us and then split. But Mike B and High Spots redefined ethical fan fests, and I think we had no more problems. It was just a couple of bad eggs. There was one,
Sure.
I thought it was in Indianapolis, where people got ripped off, where Medusa and Cornette and like Tommy Rich and
Mm.
Ricky Morton had driven in like many, many hours and got like no money and then lost money on the gas, which they could ill afford. Just
Yeah.
felt horrible. And then that preceded the Cow Palace Wrestle, I think I forget what it was called, Wrestle Fan Fest or something, where like nearly everybody got ripped off except Bill Behrens, who made sure Abyss, the Dudleys, the Steiners from TNA got
Smart man.
yeah, got paid. There were a couple other TNA talents, but so WFA was a pleasure. So I'm just saying I absorbed. I went to John Arizzi's Weekend of Champions. He and I, of course, did the Blassie fan club together. He was the president, I was the VP. Uh, and but there were those, there were other ones. WFA ones were super fun, different territory every time.
Yeah.
And like the Atlanta one in '74, just a wealth of talent from that office. Bob Armstrong and the three Garvins, none of whom were related, and that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Well, so anyway, I'm sorry I went on a 10-minute
No, that's good.
binge, but what was so you went to 82? Like I think the phony Jim Ross, it was not the Jim Ross that we know, the greatest announcer, maybe in my book second to Gordon Soley, but still on my Mount Rushmore is, as he should be. Jim Ross is so incredible. And
Sure.
I'm pulling
Yeah.
for his health. Obviously, I've sent him a couple of emails, but the fake Jim Ross, not related, bought it. I'm thinking it was like 78 or maybe 79, where he had one in either, I think it was Memphis, because Jimmy Suzuki asked to be gigged at where all the WFA members went to that TV taping on that Saturday.
Yeah.
Jimmy Suzuki there is more Mark, not so much a photographer yet, asked to be gigged on TV, gigs on TV. I think he presented an award. So that's like when I was on the board for like 3.5 years, each year you would be tasked with, like I was given the first year awards for Chavo, Piper, and then we had that convention. Anyway, I was going to be in St. Louis and Kansas City, so I gave Harley his in ring at the Kansas City Memorial Auditorium, which was a
Yep.
big thrill
Yeah.
for me. So those were fantastic. So there are only a few, the Cow Palace one, the one I thought was in Indianapolis of all places. But most all of them, Arizzi's things were amazing, particularly the 91 where he had Bruno, Thez, Buddy Rogers. Bruno refused to be in the same room with those other two. So he was in the free room, whereas the other ones were in the Polaroid, where you pay, the Polaroid and the autograph thing, where Flair was and Rick Rude and Nancy Sullivan and
Yeah.
a shitload of people. So Bruno was in there, like a couple of vendor tables down from Mick Foley and Meltzer's, where I was stationed. And that was the first time a bunch of us met Sean Waltman, fresh out of Eddie Sharkey's, as Lightning Kid. He hadn't
Yeah.
really been heard of unless you were reading Torch then, like I was, as
Yeah.
Wade Keller's Japan correspondent. And so I paired guys who would know that I thought these were the up and comers. At 91 at Arizzi's conventions, I had back-to-back poses, which I can send you. Waltman with Chris Candido and Taz, who was then Tasmaniac, who Bill Apter was giving me and some other writer photographers 8x10s and saying, "Can you help this kid get some PR?" Who would know that Taz would turn into, this amazing athlete, this amazing voice, all this great stuff. So I'll shut up now. Let's get back to so you were at, they did a series of, I'm sure they were fun. So you're saying 82 was right in Indianapolis, right?
Yes. Yeah. And of course, right, they always coupled them with a show. And I'm pretty sure the 82 Indianapolis show was headlined by Bruiser versus Race for the W. That's when Race was having his little run in WWA. That lasted a little bit.
Wow.
Yeah, and
That's a hell of a match. That's like Kiel. The only place I'm aware of they met was at Kiel.
yeah, no,
Prior to
no,
that, of
yeah,
course.
they had Harley, he held the WWA title. He only had like a handful of matches in WWA, but right, there were substantial matches, and they utilized him. But see, that's the thing. I think Bruiser had all these connections, right? That he could pull these guys, right? I mean, San Martino had a tag title
Well,
run.
that was, yeah, and even Bruiser uh, at different points, but he and Sammartino in 75-ish went to help Annie Gunkel when
Yeah,
she was waging war against the full Paul Jones, not the wrestler, but the promoter Paul
sure,
Jones
right,
in
yeah,
Atlanta.
yeah,
That whole thing where Tom Ernesta was sent in as a Trojan horse to F with her
yep,
booking.
yep,
But you got to give it to what a great lady. And I'm really pro females and minorities in the biz.
yes,
I
absolutely,
know Tiny Tim Hampton was major with WWA,
yep,
not
yep, yep,
a guy you put a title on, but just a cool guy, good worker.
yep.
And but it was Jerry. What's the deal with Jerry Jaffe? When did he take on the Dr. Jerry Graham name? I'll have to do my research. That's kind of
He,
stuff I
yeah,
forgotten or don't
he
know.
had a. I don't know where the connection started with him and actual Graham, but there are right. It was early on, and I mean he had the Graham blessing. He teamed with Graham for a while as junior, and then stuck with it. Um,
But he ends up in Bruiser's, and he ended up
he
running
did.
Bruiser Bedlam after.
He did. He ended up buying
Yeah,
with a money partner, a Budweiser distributor. He ended up buying the WWE essentially, moving it first to Detroit, then to Toledo, and running the show as Bruiser Bedlam. But yeah, he worked but he worked for Bruiser from the late 70s on up. But yeah, he
he
went.
had an amazing collection. He was in the running. We're jumping from lots of topics, but they're all
That's
history.
okay.
I
Yeah,
promise your listeners.
it's fun.
Um,
This is what it is. This is the business.
well, today, because I've had no sleep, it's ADD
That's
type thing. But
okay. That's all right.
Jerry Jaffe was in the running to get Ronnie Martinez had called me up out of the blue. I don't know why the F he called me up because I did. Uh, I was given a ton of betas from a guy that was like one of the kings of tape trading, brought upon by Meltzer, that had, a lot of betas that he would convert onto VHS for
Yeah.
folks.
And I guess
Anyway,
we should let people know, right? Beta was a videotape. What I don't know what you call it. What do you call that? A format. A
it was, yeah,
format
and
prior to
pros would use it.
VHS.
Yeah, but it was expensive. Those tapes were
It was.
expensive, and studios would use them because I did my own TV show,
Yeah.
my little Dink Talk show, but I had different wrestling fan brothers and sisters that I would, when I would syndicate it out, like send it, and I would have them put it on cable access in their city. Like Evan Ginsberg put it on in New York City and Long Island, etc.
Yeah.
And I would list him. I would just change the graphics so it said, local New York producer Evan Ginsberg, or
Yeah.
my brother in Los Angeles when my wife and I were still living in Northern California, and folks I knew in Atlanta. But so Ronnie Martinez, who is Pedro Martinez's son, Lord knows why he didn't pronounce it. This is his dad, the promoter, who was kind of a slimy guy who owed a lot of folks money. I'm sorry, that's my opinion only.
Sure.
But I've been told this by the boys. Pedro was Johnny Power's partner, the NWF Buffalo, which is an
Yep.
exciting territory. No
Absolutely.
dissing that.
Yeah.
And Buffalo, and then parts of Ohio Sheik didn't have, and that whole story with Powers selling to Inoki. Those were Inoki's first titles in New Japan. He purchased from Powers. They
Yeah.
dropped the
Right.
tag straps to Inoki and Sakaguchi. He had Von Hess and Von Schutz dropped them. I don't even think they were true NWF tag champions, but in LA, atop a tournament in '74, and then the singles, Powers dropped to Inoki, the NWF World Championship. That was, kind of a prestigious one, not on the level of the three bigs, Tri-WF, AWA, NWA.
Yeah.
But so Powers later drops in Japan to Inoki straight. But Ronnie Martinez, that's the way he pronounced his last name, had allegedly, or he told me his dad let him have all of this massive library. Like Pedro Martinez used to weasel tapes, like from Roy Shire. He'd say, "Oh, can you just send me your tape? I'll pay you whatever the cost of the tape is, but I'm going to send them to Israel or different parts of the Middle East and Europe and blah blah blah. But he actually was. I guess he was getting some kind of payola back, allegedly, or what I was told. But so he passes, and then we all heard the rumor that Ronnie somehow went in the middle of the night and got all of the tapes because his mother didn't want him in the house. This was all stuff that we were told, and it was all over, the rumor mill.
Yeah.
But he was selling this collection. I didn't have any interest, and then he pitched it, and I thought I was told that Jerry Jaffe ended up getting it, but Jerry didn't get the even more massive George Crybaby Cannon uh, tape library, which was just huge, lots of betas, 3/4 inch, 2 inch, all these different formats. Do you know anything about that? I mean, Jerry's still alive, right?
He is, absolutely, yes. Yeah, Jerry's a friend, and I don't know. I have Jerry has given me some tapes, but they're all Bruiser Bedlam stuff, um, from his shows and his stuff. So I don't know. I
You
don't
might know
know.
that. You know what? I wish you would put us in touch, or maybe if I don't screw up today's show, have me back on with Jerry, because I would like to pick his brain. I don't think I've ever met him. I've heard different stories, but I was happy to see someone carry on that tradition, and that guy has a lot of history behind
He
him. So
does.
not
Jerry's a
knocking him at all. And
no,
I've heard
no.
he was a good worker.
He is. Jerry is. He. I mean, he had a WWF tryout.
Wow.
With they called him. Ooh, what was it? Mad Dog Man. I can't remember the exact name. He had a TV taping where he managed Big John Studd
Wow.
and maybe a couple others, and it didn't work out. They didn't sign him, but he did get a
He was a
tryout.
good talker from the stuff I saw. He was I mean, come on,
Definitely.
because they've had some shit. Vince Jr. had some. Come on, remember that brief run when Von Raschke was the manager?
Yeah.
What was
Yes.
he called? What the hell was
Oh,
he called?
I think just the Baron or something like that, or
Yeah, the Baron. And
they
then
just
there
put
was
him.
some other
Yeah,
ones.
he wore like a hood, or it was like managing the powers of pain. I mean, they didn't utilize him properly.
And then I think Sika, was it Sika or Offa that managed this brief?
Yeah, I'm not sure. Yeah, one of them. Yeah. Yeah, again, but yeah, like in the early '80s, Jerry had Jaffe, Jerry Graham Jr. Yeah, he had a tryout. They didn't sign him, but
He might want the photos I have of Jerry because on a positive note about Jerry, and Jerry was always upbeat. He had like no money at the end,
yeah,
in the wheelchair, but he comes to thank God he came to that particular 1996 Cauliflower Alley. So we're talking about conventions now or fan fests,
yeah,
because it wasn't the CAC started, and Mike Mazurki really was the face of it. He wasn't a co-founder. That was Art Abrams and another no-name partner, but they told this story that Mike Mazurki had been a co-founder, but they made him the president and the face because this guy was globally famous, not just as fantastic wrestler, he wrestled all over the place, but his IMDb at that time would only be beaten by Gene LaBelle later on
hmm
for all the movie and TV film work that this guy Mike Mazurki did in some major films and all kinds of other stuff. So he's the face, and they just had them as luncheons a couple of times a year downtown LA at Little Joe's or the old Spaghetti Factory, and it was the motto was just come break bread, no leave heat at the door. So the guys would just do that. There weren't awards the way. So I'm coming back up to 1996 Cauliflower at our best location for years once we started giving out awards, and that's all it was. It's not a Hall of Fame, it's awards uh, at the Sportsman's Lodge in the Valley, which was a mecca for movie and TV people, during the week when they were nearby it, because it was Burbank. So there's Disney Studios, there's all of the big studios were there where they filmed The Tonight Show with
hmm
Carson, etc.
hmm
So and one of the 1 year that Kurt Hennig came with his dad, I think it was 97, he sees Laura Dern, Maurice Steenburgen, Ted Danson, and great singer Dwight Yoakam
yeah,
in the parking lot of Cauliflower Alley was having their reunion, but it was during the day, and so he drags me and George Napolitano. He goes, "Come here, I want you guys to take pictures." So he goes right up with all the balls in the world to these people, industry people who didn't know who the F he was, and he just goes up. He goes, "I'm Mr. Perfect from WWF. Can you take my picture?" And they were kind of their mouths dropped that he would interrupt them, and we took pictures of him with these famous people. So that Cauliflower Alley of 1996 that Jerry Graham went to when Thez was president. I mean, there was Ray Stevens. I drove him and his wife, who was a worker legend, who she claimed broke him in Nashville, Teresa Thies. They
Hmm.
had split, but they would go to all these reunions together. We went to the Mobile, Alabama one together, so they wanted me to drive. Anyway, so there's that. There's Killer Kowalski. There's like all these legends, Inoki and Sakaguchi, the World Wrestling Peace Festival for Inoki, the prelude to the North Korea, but the show at the Sports Arena, LA Sports Arena, with a ton of MMA greats. Fujiwara, the guy that created the Fujiwara armbar, and Danny Severn, who was teaming with Inoki for that big main event. Oleg Taktarov, who was one of best friends with Kenny Shamrock. Anyway, all these folks are there. They all wanted to pose with Jerry Graham, and I just took a zillion pictures. Jerry was in seventh heaven. He didn't last long. But one of my points with Jerry Graham is, so Thez is up there in a tuxedo. Jerry's in his wheelchair, like right in front. Victor Rivera and two others I can't name are really they're at the open bar. They were plastered and they were like on their backs and screaming and yelling, and Thez was like yelling at them to be quiet. He was never going to have a free open bar ever again. And Jerry Graham just was screaming at Thez, what about Stanislav Sobiesko? He's like reeling off these names that you would see from the NWA champions list going back to
Yeah.
1895. He's just reeling off these names, irritating Thez, who
Yeah.
refused any of us ask him to take a picture with Jerry Graham before or later. Uh, and Tess was the one who spread the story to most of us. Learned of the thing with when Jerry's mom died, and
Oh
he
yeah.
got the corpse, and he has
Yeah.
her in the back, and he's crying. He's driving across Nevada or something in a convertible with her in the back, and she'd passed away.
Yeah.
But he was in such grief and stuff. But anyway, Jerry Graham, total legend. Put
Yeah.
aside the burning of the legit burning that Thez verified that he would light cigars with $100 bills and other stuff to, I guess, impress rats.
Yeah.
Impress rats primarily.
Yeah. Well, and I'm curious, through all your decades of working with magazines, newsletters, and et cetera, et cetera, how did right, you're a West Coast guy. How did the WWA Indianapolis get viewed by the other groups, like through those years, like the '70s, et cetera? What was your guys' opinion of the WWA through those correspondence?
Jeff Walton would be like the best to talk to because he also had dealings like, hey, send us back the belt, stop using the name. I think
Yeah.
Jules Strongbow and or Cal Eaton. So Cal Eaton was the money guy, the promoter, but the real brains. And this guy was, I mean, just an amazing booking mind for so many things, like turning when he turned Fred Blassie face. I'll get back to Joel Strong, but when he turned him back face, it was either two or three cage matches with the Sheik, heel heel. Jules loved having face against face and heel against heel when he could do it, and he did it in a way that drew money at the sports arena or the Olympic Auditorium. And then turned Blassie face at the end with Abdullah Farouk, Ernie Roth, as
Hmm.
the Weasel, later Grand Wizard, in
Yep. Yep.
the shark cage, the little baby cage above the ring, and it backfires. And then he has the following Wednesday on TV at Channel 5, he has Blassie say to Rocky Johnson, look, I want to have a scientific match. That's what we call babyface matches then.
Sure. Yeah.
Scientific match with you, and if I pull any underhanded tactic, and I'm almost verbatim quoting Blassie, I'll leave town, and blah, blah, blah. So they have a scientific match. Blassie doesn't do any heel stuff. It solidifies Blassie. Goes almost in a couple of weeks, couple of months from lead heel for like a full decade to this insane babyface to where I'm sure you've seen the photos when he's having the war with John Tolis, which led to
Yeah.
the August 1971 mega stacked card with Sheik Bobo as the underneath. They advertise it as the two greatest feuds of all time, Blassie Tolis and Sheik Bobo Brazil. Absolutely stacked card with the match that stole the match of the night was Mil Mascaras against the original El Solitario, who was like a Rey Mysterio Jr. And Mascaras was still good, and he would sell at that period of time. He's still relatively new and one of our lead faces. It was an amazing card that so viewing it because they let guys back, like Bearcat Wright was allowed back in '71 after the office said they would never allow him back after he refused to drop the strap. Bruiser like to Blassie.
Mm.
I think it was just guys in the office because we were looking and we were starting to see some great things out of Bruiser's office, and it, lasted the test of time. So whenever the office was formed, what year did he, was it 67, 68 in Indianapolis proper was the headquarters?
64 is when him and
Okay, so
Snyder.
it was even earlier. Okay, I'm sorry. So
Yeah.
64, I think by then the heat and the piss offness had dissipated to where then you had to just respect that Bruiser is drawing and then we all love Wilbur Snyder, so he kind of offset the fact that people were in the office doing the day-to-day stuff were angry at Bruiser for doing that. Just the word I heard later on was unprofessional, but whatever. I mean, Bruiser was like the Road Warriors of his time. Like, uh, I think only in concert with the Crusher, because Crusher did sell in the AWA, but when paired with Dick, they were doing like the no sell. If their head was popped into a turnbuckle, they'd refuse to sell. We wouldn't see anybody later do that until the Road Warriors did it, but they were the first. And the pop that anytime I was at the amphitheater, the pop that Bruiser and or with especially with Crusher, particularly that August 75, uh, it was amazing. So I was a huge Bruiser mark, whenever I would see him, anybody that I could pose him with or whoever he would take a picture with, but him teaming with Bobo, that was a thrill for me because, just the aggregated history with those guys. But let me ask, I'm going to ask you a question.
Sure.
And then I'm going to ask you and your listeners a question before we started taping, uh, that I said I was going to warn you in advance. But did you go to any prior WFIAs? And what have you heard about the
No, no.
WFA? Did you know that it sort of had been purchased by this Jim Ross guy who kind of people thought he was ruining it by that point, whenever he took it over?
Yeah, no, I really when I first heard about it was just ads in magazines, and I wasn't really familiar with a lot of the behind the scenes, who were the key proponents and whatever else. I just knew it was this this fan group, so to speak, and then I knew it was coming right to Indianapolis in '82. So
I want to give credit to it. I left out Diane Devine had stuff to do with helping create it and helping maintain it. And she's still alive, thank God. We lost George Amakropoulos, who was on the board when I was put on. And there were some other females there, so it was very progressive. Marilee Neitzel, who ran the Jim and Johnny Valiant fan club. I forget if she was from Boston or Indiana proper, as a state. But Diane Devine, who she was always a presence there, and I think she was one of the rest of us stopped going once this Jim Ross guy came in to power. No more Don Wilson. I think George Sire stopped going. He's one of the mega historians. Thank goodness we still have around like Diane. So we kind of lost that element. But I heard the conventions, when they go to different places, a different place each year, still a lot of fun. And then I don't know what led to the demise. I forget what year, was it 83 or 84, WFA finally got the plug pulled on it?
yeah, somewhere around there. It's just one of those. I don't know. It's a very convoluted thing, I think, right? Just lots of people in and out, and people trying to keep it going, but
We were going to try to do that in at CAC. Dave Brzezinski and Tom Burke. I was involved, but I came in later. Those guys were the founders, and Eric Goldenberg was still alive. We were going to try to have a reunion of any true WFIA. Do it as like a daytime seminar, a WFA reunion at CAC, because once it moved. Long story I won't get into. It moved from the best location it was ever at, the Sportsman's Lodge, where it was only a one night only thing, where we had a third. If you look at the latest newsletter, I have a two-pager on the history of the Reel Awards. So we had one third movie and TV called Reel, REEL, which is a type of, the film, the reel to reels and the films that you'd see at the 60s movie theaters going or prior to that. We had a third boxers and MMA fighters and a third wrestlers. And we did all of those awards, a bunch within each and speeches on one Saturday night. Now, when Carl Lauer, our VP, kind of aggressively overtook the club when the actual founders had passed in 1999, he moves us to Vegas in 2000, where he and I served along with Sheldon Goldberg and Brittany Brown, female wrestler, and others on Moolah and Lil when they aggressively took over the sort of the women's equivalent of CAC, the LIWA, Ladies International Wrestling Association. Carl Lauer just became infatuated with Vegas because Moolah had her annual fan fest there, which were 2 to 3 days. So once CAC got to Vegas in 2000, where it's still, it's held every year, and it's next month in August, big reunion. It's going to be huge. Mick Foley's going to do a big show, and Bret Hart's getting the award, and Natty's returning. There's a lot of big names. It became a 3-day thing. We have daytime seminars the Tuesday and Wednesday. In the past, Jim Ross has given them. I gave one on the greatest voices in wrestling when I was blessed to have had somebody at the last minute canceled. So I was given 2 days to put this thing together as the daytime seminar. And so I turned it into greatest voices in wrestling. We had Jim Ross, Lance Russell, Jerry Lawler, Howard Finkel. Heenan was there, but he couldn't talk at that point, but he got a standing ovation in his wheelchair. The place went ballistic when he was there. Like all of these great voices and more. The very first color commentator, wrestler Pepper Martin, was there, who straddled. He was doing color commentary in both two unrelated territories, LA and San Francisco, in the late 60s, early 70s. In LA, he did color with Dick Lane, and San Francisco was with Hank Renner. That's mind blowing that even happened, and he was still wrestling for both promotions too. But anyway, so I had all of those guys. That was a good one. Bill Apter's given seminars and done his karaoke act, and so it's a lot of fun. But it gives me the feel, at least, for good or bad, less amount of the wrestlers than during the 60s and 70s. But more fans and people coming from all over the world, like from Africa and South America and stuff, to CAC. So I'll shut up. But did you didn't go? Was that the only one you went to? I'm going back to Indianapolis, WFA. The only one you went to?
That is, yeah. That's the only one.
So did Jerry and Bruiser come to that, or who came to that one? Because I'm forgetting the year.
Yeah, those guys were there. Oh man, I've got some pictures. Who was it that sent them to me? Was it Dave Drayson? It might have been Dave Drayson. Somebody here recently sent me a bunch of photos, but yeah, it was Bruiser and pretty much the guys that were working for Bruiser.
Paul Christie was
Paul Christie. Yep. Paul Christie was there.
Boy, do I miss that guy! And he bring his beautiful wife. A lot of people,
Bunny Love. Yeah,
Miss Bunny Love.
That's right. Yeah. Paul Christie is so underappreciated. He was so so good, and those are the kind of guys, right? That oh man, for the WWA that I missed. That
he came, the greatest. The 1996 Cauliflower was the greatest internationally, but for territory mark like I am, 2000 in Vegas, the first one, guys that only came to one CAC, and I was on the board then. I was on the board for quite a few years, and when I saw who was coming, I said, let's set designated tables for territories. Like we had Detroit, Chic.
Yeah.
And so FERPA was there, and Fred Curry, Flying Fred Curry, who we just lost a little while ago, like 2 months. Yeah. And his sons came, and Johnny Powers came for our Toronto table. So we had all these territory tables, an Atlanta office, and Heenan was there. So he's like straddling Bruisers and the Chicago table and the Atlanta office. You remember Heenan's time in Atlanta. And it was amazing. Powers, God, so many guys. Moskers was at that one. So now we have fewer of those guys from that era, and I'm just hoping we get more Barry Windhams and hope we get Rick and Scott Steiner and stuff like that, because it's not a place where Flair kept telling me when I'd invite him to come and get honored and blah blah blah, and I'd try saying whatever to get him to come, then he'd say, oh, that's just a place where you go when you're about ready to die. And I go, no, it's not. We've had all kinds of folks there. And I hope we have more of a presence in different promotions, because about 15 years ago, we had a regular influx of TNA talent. Awesome Kong and cheerleader Melissa Anderson, who was Raisha Saeed managing Kong, also brought in ODB. and Ivory, who wasn't really with TNA, but she brought her in, and several others. Gail Kim, she brought in for I think at least 2 years, and uh, so I hope we're not WWE centric. They usually buy 4 to 5, 6 tables right up in front at the Cauliflower Alley, and then we don't get it was a big deal in 2019 that we got Billy Corgan's NWA champion of class, Nick Aldis,
Hmm.
who's still, I mean, boy, all the credit in the world. So anxious to see. I hope he gets in the ring with Gunther and all of that
Oh,
stuff going
sure.
on there.
Yeah.
So this brings me, so let me let you finish up on that before I just ask how people time budget to watch all of the wrestling. Because even though I tape all this stuff, I have like 40 shows, like the last half hour of NXT, I haven't been able to watch because I have to get some sleep.
Yeah. Well, how can you? Right. It's funny because it's like, I remember back in the day, right? There was all this wrestling that I could watch, right? I was from Central Indiana. And in those years of the 80s, when, the national expansion, and I was getting, WWE, the NWA, the Crockett stuff. I could pick up Memphis because we were so close to Louisville.
Right.
The AWA on the ESPN, uh, there was still world class being shown on ESPN. All these promotions, I had no trouble watching all of it. Now I have to pick and choose and fast forward and watch bits. It's like I don't have enough time. I can't consume everything.
No, and I feel guilty when I tape and miss. Well, actually, I don't even have to do that now because it's just on YouTube, which is a blessing for everybody.
Sure.
And Billy Corgan, I think, is starting this weekend on free TV, and also Scotty D'Amore's
Yeah.
fantastic Maple Leaf is going to
Maple
be
Leaf.
on my.
Yeah.
Is my AEW, is that the app you pay for, or?
Yeah, that's their streaming app now that they've just recently started, I believe.
Well, because his weekly show is going to be on there.
Yeah.
What a great story that is, from
Sure.
being let go, which is ridiculous. I don't understand. I still am pained by Tommy Dreamer, and then you've seen the residual effect of guys leaving because, I'm sure it had something to do with Tommy as head of creative being pushed out. And I don't think Delirious can carry the whole load, even though he's super talented and a great guy. But
Yeah.
uh, whatever. So, but and there are shows I don't want to fast forward through Raw, but sometimes you got to fast forward
Yeah.
through. You do.
You have to. Yeah. And it's funny because it's weird because it feels like there's less prominent promotions, but yet there's more content than ever. It's than it used to be, right? Because it's like used to you had more promotions, but it's like it felt like each of them only had like an hour chunk a week. And now it's like
That's the perfect time for me. Thank God SmackDown, because that was a dredge to watch or even fast forward. Because I want to watch Bill Maher and stuff like that. I got a life, and it's not
Yeah.
just around wrestling and music. And
Sure.
man, there was a documentary I taped. I sort of watched some of it. Burning Man. There's all these great docus,
Yeah.
John Candy docus, and all these
Oh
amazing
yeah. Yeah.
Filler and Mira, all this great comedy. And there is, for those of us, like I'd spend my summers in the 70s and later in New York and often crash at Evan Ginsberg's, and we'd watch Robin Bird's porn talk show. She has a whole great HBO documentary that just came out that's amazing on her life. And she's a very sharp female who we had her on when we did the show called Legends about 20 years ago. We had her on at least once. Very sharp lady. So all these great docus. So yeah, it's rough. I got tonight. There's LFG and then two brand new rivals on A&E, but I got to watch it all. So I just don't know how other people are doing it. But were we done talking about WFA and fan fests and conventions? Because by and large, like the
Yeah.
Charlotte reunions were all fantastic. The Mid-Atlantic ones, they were incredible. So it's only a few kind of
Yeah.
spoiled things, but thank God since 2007, I think everything has been on the up and up. There's a plethora of them.
Yeah.
Japan is even they'll bring in guys and they'll just do signings and talk to people. In fact,
Yeah.
Japan, I was hired he's no longer with Shukan Pro magazine, but my editor there. And I'm the only guy ever in history, and it won't be duplicated because Gong went under around 2002, allegedly due to a Yakuza scandal. But I was the only guy Japanese or Gaijin, foreign or two, have written and shot for both competing, and they were fiercely competing, Gong and Shukan Pro. So
Yeah.
Weekly Gong, which was the older, and Shukan Pro, which survives it at the same time. And Fumi Saito, my editor at Shukan Pro, brought in a whole troop of like 30 Japanese fans to Pittsburgh. And I happened to be there to cover my friend Norm Connor's ICW or IWC promotion.
Yeah.
ICW was Paphos.
Yeah.
So it was IWC in
IWC. Yeah.
Pittsburgh, where I photographed an amazing Chris Hero CM Punk 1 hour.
Oh, yeah.
They started their feud 1 hour Broadway. It was loaded with talent, a three-way with uh, AJ Styles, Samoa Joe, and was it Low Key?
Yeah,
No, it wasn't
Loki.
Low Key. Well, it might have been Low Key. No, I think it was the guy that was part of America's Most Wanted. Who's that legend that the Hispanic?
Well, there was Homicide.
Yeah, Homicide.
There you go. Yeah.
Homicide was in there against, and that was a great match. I know
Yeah.
I've seen Low Key in with those other guys, and then when he had
Yeah.
King of the Indies, which begat most all of that stuff that I was Roland Alexander's photographer for, that 2 day thing where it was like everybody that was anybody on the planet. If any of your listeners know what is happening with Black Nature Boy, was it
Scoot Andrews? Yeah.
What I think he left the biz, but if anybody can find the contact for him, that guy was amazing. That guy was so good at King of the Indies, working with various. We had like everybody, Adam Pierce, who's now the GM for Raw.
Yeah.
All these years, he was in it. It ended up with Low Key against Brian Danielson in the finals, but Samoa Joe, Frankie Kazarian, Spanky, Brian Kendrick.
Sure.
All of these guys. Brian Alvarez wrestled in that tournament, and then in the second night battle royal.
Yeah.
Amazing stuff. And of course Gabe and RF, who won't be mentioned, were that was their basis for founding Ring of Honor.
Ring of
was
Honor,
the
yeah.
King of the Indies, APW, which was in Beyond the Mat.
Yep.
Anyway, that's for a whole nother show. But
Sure.
were we done talking about fan fests and conventions and stuff?
Yeah. Yeah. Actually, let's. I was going to ask because I'm always fascinated by wrestling photographers because it seemed right. Every territory had their photographer, right? And there's lots of these wrestling photographers that went on to be prominent wrestling personalities, right? I mean, obviously Jim Cornette, Paul Heyman. In Indianapolis, we had
Eddie Gilbert. Eddie Gilbert.
Correct.
When I started, I was co-running Blassie's fan club, and then we won all the WFA awards that year, John Arrizzi and I. And then at the same time, I started my Tolis Brothers fan club, and then at the '77 Dallas WFA, I won all the awards for that, best bulletin, best fan club, blah blah. But Eddie Gilbert and Jim Cornette were the first two to send me a couple of bucks. I think it was $5 for a year's sub where you'd get a monthly newsletter. They were the first two guys, and they were still photographers then, whatever year that was. 73. Eddie had not yet started, and Jim hadn't started in the biz, to my knowledge. But anyway, those were the days. That was, a lot of folks communicated like in the pen pal section of the wrestling, the magazines bonded people, but the newsletters even more so because that was our way to express ourselves. My Tolis Brothers newsletter, often 50 pages or more every month, had very little except on the title page of what was going on with the Tolis boys.
Yeah.
I have a report on Chris Tolis, taking time away from the biz to take care of their sister who had MS in Hamilton, Ontario. I had coverage, like actual results. So it was kind of as shoot as you could get then on all the territories globally. That was what I was doing. And Dave Meltzer was the correspondent for me then. But that was our way that we all communicate. Georgianne, who had all these different fan clubs for Chet Wallach, Buddy Rogers, Bruno Sammartino, and J.J. Dillon, who had the Johnny Valentine fan club, and he produced a newsletter. That is how we all communicated, and guys had different styles with each. So the photographers in each territory, like if you look at St. Louis, when I'd go there, the head boss man was John Tocco, excellent photographer. Or Detroit, they had a plethora of all these guys from Dave Bersinski on down. Amazing guys. Obviously the king of it was the Northeast, obviously with Bill Apter, who by that point had gone from being one of the very first wrestling radio shows, although there were others that preceded Bill's, hired to, be senior editor there for Stan Weston's mag, our beloved, and I inducted him at Cauliflower Alley, one of the last years we were still in LA, my editor friend there. But um, Napolitano, but there was also Frank Amato, and a lot of people forget, but if you look at Ring Wrestling and pretty much all of the magazines, and Frank Amato was another name, just a little smidge below Apter and Napolitano. Great photographers there. Florida, there was, oh God, and Danny and Vicky Goddard.
Yeah.
There's so many guys. Atlanta, uh, Indianapolis, you had some amazing photographers.
Well,
Hawaii,
yeah.
George Beppu for this was not Liam Ivia, but this was the glory days with Ed Francis, former
Yeah.
wrestler whose kids were all NFL stars, and Russ Francis was one of the most famous of the NFL stars, kids of Ed Francis to do wrestling. Although the other guys were in, he had one other brother, forget which one was in WrestleMania 2, the Battle Royal that Russ Francis
Yeah.
with
Yeah.
Fridge Raider Perry and.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't remember his name. Yeah. Well,
But
yeah,
every
like,
territory, and then the king of Japanese photographers, forget Jimmy Suzuki or even Bill Otten, and they, as great as they were, but the king, who was one of my contributors to my Tolos Brothers newsletter, and this guy would send me his photos, programs, lineup sheets, shoot results, stuff backstage, was Koichi Yoshizawa, the king of all time. We lost him about a year and a half ago, something like that. Koichi was the king, and he would tour the U.S. He lived in the U.S. for a time. This guy, one of the greatest. Montreal, Tony Lanza. There was
yeah.
nobody until he got that condition where he didn't want to leave the house. This guy set the standard for pose backstage, 5 or 10 out of Meltzer stars for pose photography. Tony Lanza, one of the greatest of all time. Him and Napolitano, I'd put as the greatest of all time,
Yeah.
ever, ever, ever.
Yeah.
But
Well,
every
that's,
territory had their, Jim Barnett and Mark Lewin's Australia territory had a great, amazing photographer who get stuff in Norm Keitzer and Jim Melby's magazines.
yeah. And that's what I was going to ask. Cause like, in Indianapolis, we had Scott Rummer for many years that ended up,
Yeah.
moving on to becoming a manager. But as fans, right, it's so weird to think in the modern context of how we found other fans in other parts of the country through newsletters, through magazines, through the pen pal sections, through, trading results.
That's exactly right, because that's when it started. As early as 1970, some of us would tape. We had the old
Yeah.
cassette recorders, and prior to that, reel to reel, we would tape the audio from shows. We didn't have VCR, so you couldn't get a visual unless maybe you took a 8 millimeter camera and filmed a little stuff.
Yeah.
But we would trade tapes and then return them. So I'm getting, like, each week I was getting AWA in Florida and Detroit and Montreal, another great territory there, the Vachon's Grand Prix against the Rougeos La Lutte, which later became international. I was, it was just such a fun period of time. I'm
It
seeing
was.
it now, but well, nobody has to tape trade anymore. Everything's on YouTube. But that was
Yeah.
we communicated, and it led. That's what sort of then, because Meltzer would send me stuff from and Rich Frisk, who became one of Roy Shire's referees. He was the one who I have a complete collection of Roy Shire's TV from 1961. Shire started in 1960, but he used Stu Hart and Sheik's, other people, Burt Ruby's out of Detroit, other people's TV. And he spent a whole year until he convinced all those guys from Indianapolis and Ohio to come out. Stevens and Kenji Shibuya, Pepper Gomez, Cowboy Bob Ellis, Wilbur Snyder, etc., to come out and work for him. Uh, so anyway, geez, this is what happens when you're 70.
Well, that's okay. No,
Oh,
I'm
so
just.
that's what we were. Yeah. So so Rich Frisk made a complete collection of. He had it on reel to reel, all the audio, including the show opening and bumper and closing music, and he put that on a tape for me. So, but that's what we've started doing, and that really, that's led into Meltzer gets credited, and probably rightfully so. But the videotape traders, once VCRs were affordable and VHS tapes, when you could tape as much as you could on a 6-hour tape. You'd go to
Sure.
SLP mode from 2 hours. You didn't want to just, if somebody wanted
Yep.
quality first gen, okay, 2 hour, but most of us were
We
taping
wanted
stuff
the
for other
length.
people. Yeah, like in San Francisco, LaBelle's show followed from LA, followed on the same exact channel, Roy Shire's show on Saturdays. So you could put, 2, 3 hours, to 2 weeks worth, and then send it off to somebody to watch, and then send it back, or they make a copy of it, whatever.
Yeah, it's funny to think, and I do this a lot, right? I think of how it was compared to the modern content, right? Where so many people now think they're claim they're knowledgeable, right? And it's easier to look into history a little, quote unquote, a little deeper, right, with the internet and YouTube and such. Back then, it was not easy, and when you would encounter someone who was as passionate as you were, or you encountered a newsletter or a fanzine, or you found that guy at the local flea market who had this plethora of old magazines, it's like you had discovered, the fountain of youth. It was monumental. It was difficult, right? You had put in the work. It was unique. It was different. It felt it's different, right? And but as you
Well,
guys,
Keith Elliott Greenberg said this, I've said it, some of us have, but that really was a great bonding mechanism. But
it
also,
was.
wrestling taught us history, or excuse me, geography and cultural differences.
Yeah,
Because I knew nothing about, if I knew nothing about the layout of Ohio or Michigan, for example. And then I learned from my friends, Dave Brzezinski, or other folks there. And Scott Romer too is a longtime buddy, and you probably know he married Dick
sure.
the Bruiser's daughter for a
Yep,
time,
yep.
and who I think also, wasn't she the one that was also married to Spike Huber?
She was, and yeah,
And
she
those
was.
girls were beautiful, by the way. But
Yeah,
anyway, um, we learned geography. Like, I learned the whole layout of Australia, so I could see why these guys couldn't drive the territory then in the 70s, that amazing WCW territory. That was its name then, Barnett's name for it,
yeah.
with Spiros Arion and Marky Lewin pretty much handling the book with others, and Ricard involved in it, and all the great, amazing stuff. I would learn, oh, gee, Melbourne is this far away from Sydney, and blah, blah, blah. That's why you have to take planes.
Yeah,
Or I learned, the whole geography layout of North Carolina, South Carolina,
yep.
Wilmington, North Carolina, where the boys would go. That's the only place on Earth where you can see Venus flytraps in the wild. And some of their time off, some of the guys that liked weird stuff, wrestlers, yeah, and then we would hear from them. So there was even some of the wrestlers that would trust the fans, or, if you were a photographer, you had a little more easy access to the boys. And then, they wouldn't explain everything, but, like, for example, in '75, Lou Albano explained gigging to me when we got him a couple of beers and got him wasted a little bit. So it was just fun, but it was a brother and sisterhood. I had as many female friends taping and
Sure.
sending me tapes, and I would send them, okay, here's our LA stuff. And just cultural nuances, like particularly Japanese. I wanted to go. So starting in '74, I was taking Japanese lessons. I already had taken Spanish lessons, and that was sort of what set me a little bit apart. And then I could get the boys in the back, or even screaming at them once they got in the ring before the match started to pose. I'd ask them in Spanish or Japanese. When I went to Montreal, used a little French.
Yeah.
But,
It's funny.
those languages I was fluent in.
Yeah, it's so funny that you bring up the geography thing, because that comes up all the time. All the time, me and my wife will watch a TV show or a movie or a documentary or whatever it might be, and a town will come up, and I'll be like, oh, that's the Build Hope town of so and so, because that's how I'll remember it. It's like, oh, it's like, I don't know what we watched, like a Criminal Minds, and it was set in Sweetwater, Texas, and I was like, oh, that's where Barry Windham's from.
Right. Or Dotham, and go, oh, wait, this is
Yeah.
just set at Dotham. I know the arena there.
Yeah, that's how it's like all these weird things, and that's how I remember it. So tell me, right? We've talked about you did all the photography and writing, etc. Did you ever get to venture into other roles, managing and such? Did you ever get to dabble in that kind of stuff?
Oh, yeah. I managed in APW at different points. I did almost everything. Roland Alexander, this is Northern California, and this
Sure.
is again the promotion that had the King of the Indies, and he
Yep.
was in
Yep.
Beyond the Mat because I was Barry Blaustein. I can't say anything. We were asked not to say anything about the celebration of life I was at about a month ago in LA, but it was beautiful, fantastic, the greatest service I had ever been to. But I was Barry Blaustein's still image photographer, almost from day one of pre-pro footage. And he trans me in. At first, the first couple of years, he had his film crew and sometimes him filming ringside. And I was shooting the stills, up and down little indies up and down the West Coast. And then we started going to Vegas and he was filming all like TC Martin shows. This was a guy who wanted to be an ECW promoter. Todd and Paul Heyman told him no, so he would just bring in particularly guys that had left or weren't officially signed. He had Terry Funk, Sabu, Mick Foley, Terry, and Sabu pretty much on all of his cards, and so Barry was filming all of that stuff. And then I suggested APW, and Roland titted out the garage and put all this camouflage stuff. I mean, it was just a garage, but it became an arena. And he filmed up there, and Roland Alexander became a bigger heel in Beyond the Mat, the greatest wrestling documentary ever, more so than Vince was in that film.
Yeah.
And then the Jake the Snake, that whatever that was, Midwest Indie, where he was messed up, and then the two night, which was a big deal. I was going to be there anyway, shooting it. I think it was, for WOW was my main venue for that. It was the night before Barely Legal, ECW's first pay-per-view,
Sure.
which I shot sitting or standing next to Bill Lawton. But the night before, Tommy Dreamer put on this amazing black tie dress-up Terry Funk tribute dinner.
Yeah.
The night before it, and that was, some of that made Beyond the Mat, obviously. The Terry Funk WrestleFest in 1997 that we were all at, and then the private after party the
Yep.
fans weren't at, but that was at Vic and Terry's. It was legit called the Double Cross Ranch there in Amarillo, and that was
Yep.
supposed to have been Terry's retirement, his umpteenth retirement. Spectacular show that FMW, other Japan groups like Michinoku Pro, and obviously it was a full ECW build event, but Bret Hart is defending the WWF title in the main event against Terry.
Yeah.
And Mick as Mankind against Sabu, and thankfully the mask came off like halfway through the thing. I just had to send Barry's family my shots of Dennis Stamp, because I was there for all of that stuff. Dennis is trying to put the onus on Terry. I don't work for gigs I'm not booked on. And this guy was a pain in the ass when he was in the LA territory. I conferred with Jeff Walton, who agreed with me. He came in from Leroy McGurk, Mike McGurk's dad, line promoter, total legend, former world NWA junior champion of the world, amazing wrestler, great promoter who Bill Watts kind of pushed out of the way when he took over Mid-Southern and then renamed it Mid-South before, Universal Wrestling.
Yeah.
But anyway, I'm forgetting what my train of thought was. So anyway, Roland Alexander and APW initially created on his very first show a Dr. Mike Lano, but it wasn't me. It was some guy in a lab coat, a white dentist lab coat, as a heel manager. And so I go, well, F this, you're going to do that. Let me be myself. And so I started managing, and then he had a show, and I would do the international report, So he had a weekly TV show on cable access, and I was sitting behind the desk talking about Japanese, Mexican, and other, promotions, particularly Europe, for that. But then I did color and play-by-play. But I did heel managing later on, like 1998 through 2000, where I was a heel against the lead baby faces at that point, Mike Modest, Donovan Morgan, and I straight out copied Jim Cornette's Poodle birthday party where my face went into a cake.
Yeah.
I managed the Sheik and Sabu, and actually for the very last, because one of my favorite people on earth is Joel Goodhart and his TWA, which begat ECW, because Todd Gordon was Joel's number two. So the very last Joel Goodhart show, Sheik was on once again in a revised main event. or a return main event against Abby in a cage. And Mitsuharu Misawa and Richard Slinger, Terry Gordy's nephew, were backstage at this thing unannounced. And I'm the only guy that took pictures of them and then presented them to Joel and Todd. But I go to Detroit, and then Sheik has the classic, his old 70s Cadillac, and he has Sabu driving us there. We're in the back. And I felt bad because hardly anybody had seen Terry and Van Dam, this Terry meaning Sabu, and RVD and Judge Dredd, another Sheik trainee in Memphis for Jarrett.
Yeah.
In like 1990. And then so we're driving up to the ECW, or excuse me, the TWA, the very last show. And we had the lobby because mainly Sheik did it, but we also said, you got to put Sabu in your reverse battle royal, the opening match of that very last TWA show.
Yeah.
And so Sabu did, and became like a legend overnight. Everybody was talking about him. But, I mean, Mick Foley was on that card, and I was saying, Mick, this guy is like duplicating some of the stuff you're doing. You guys are going to both be in a wheelchair in 5 years. And that was the one where Eddie Gilbert and Medusa, and they married briefly right after that.
Yeah.
They teamed against Luna and Mick on that very last show. And I already had my tickets. Japan had already gotten my trans and hotel for the follow-up to TWA, which didn't happen, which was going to be the very first U.S. appearance of All Japan Dream Tag Team, Crawford and Furnace against Gordy and Doc, Buddy Rogers against Buddy Landell, Battle of the Nature Boys.
Yep.
All kinds of stuff. I think there was going to be a Luna Medusa hair versus hair, so thankfully that didn't occur because I wouldn't want to see either lose their hair. But that got canceled because there were money problems for TWA, and so Joel had to put the plug on it. But anyway.
Yeah.
So anyway, from that gig, I started managing Sheik and Sabu on shitty indies like Gordon Scazzari's AWF thing, the infamous TV taping on a weekend where that was when Eddie and Medusa were married, and Eddie was supposed to come in. He'd already gotten his money to book, but instead he faxed in the booking pages. And when we realized he wasn't coming, and the thing looked like it was going to be a total fiasco, and Gordon, who Evan Ginsberg and I told him his parents had passed. I forget if it was in an auto accident or something, and they left him like 165,000. And he had only a few months left to finish law school. And we said, why don't you finish law school, get the degree, so have something. Do not blow your money on wrestling. We tried to talk him out of doing this show in Asbury Park, and then the TV taping at Vince Sr.'s old venue in Lowell, Massachusetts. But he went on with it. He had me manage Sheik and Sabu on that thing, so I got him to hire my friend Chris Cruz, who actually came up, and I think he did it for nothing, to help Gordon out, so he wouldn't blow, which he ended up doing. He blew his whole wad on that, sadly.
Yeah.
But Chris Cruz was the interviewer. I have Sheik throw fire. So I'm managing as E.F. Sharif, Sheik and Sabu, and in the back, they put up this burnoose for me. And I was using that old gimmick, if you remember E.F. Hutton, when E.F. talks, people listen. So my tagline on the TV, because Sabu and Sheik were talking, so I get to say, well, when E.F. talks, people listen. But I was E.F. Sharif because with the mustache at the time, I was told I looked like Omar Sharif, the actor legend that was in whatever the heck that thing was with Geraldine Chaplin, the gorgeous daughter of Charlie Chaplin. Laura. No, it was the Lawrence Cast, the guy that did Lawrence of Arabia. He did the Russian one. Anyway, it's one of those big. I'll look it up while we're talking. It was. I think it won the Best Picture of the year. Anyway, so Sharif was in that thing. Let's see. Dr. Zhivago.
Oh, yeah, Dr. Zhivago. Yeah.
He was the lead guy, and he's nailing Geraldine Chaplin, his wife, but also the female, the blonde female that was in Heaven Can Wait with Warren Beatty, Julie Christie.
Yeah.
Julie Christie, beautiful. So anyway, that was why I went to see that, because it was like 3.5 hour movie. So if you don't have beautiful women in it, you're going to lose me after 3.5 hours. Sorry to be a sexist pig.
Yeah.
But that was that was the time back then. Anyway.
Yeah. Oh, one thing, this might be a swear here, but I was always envious because I remember whatever it was in the 80s we got this monstrous satellite dish, right? And that's the first time I ever actually got to watch Lucha Libre was having this big satellite dish and picking up, channels from Mexico. I've always been envious of you guys in LA and Southern California and having the access to Lucha Libre that you had for all those years. Just really quick, how big an influence was Lucha Libre into that LA style?
Well, and this was another one of the times at Cauliflower, a whole Tuesday night, instead of just this thing where we'd pass the microphone against people in the audience, I came up with this. Let's do a tribute to. I did one with Dick Beyer, the Destroyer, celebrating Japanese American and Japanese wrestlers. A whole night of that, 3 hours. The year before, I did one on Hispanic wrestlers, Hispanic American ones who really didn't compete in Mexico,
Yeah.
like Pepper Gomez or Roberto and Manny Soto. It was all different cultures that were Hispanic, and the holy what anyway. So we were so basically in LA, Pepper Gomez and Pedro Morales were there in the 60s, that whole WWA time leading into the LaBelle office later. And we would get uh, I apologize too for overtaking you today verbally
No,
and interrupting you a lot because I just haven't had any sleep. Los
that's
Medicos
okay.
de Mexico. We got those
Yeah.
guys first, and they were big for 2 years, and they were feuding with Buddy Killer Austin, the Human Catastrophe, and Blassie as heels.
Yeah.
But Moskers comes in '67, and it changed the whole game. We had an influx nonstop of Raul Mata, primarily from the Luderoth, EMLL,
Yeah.
CMLL, is what it's
Yeah.
called.
Right.
Raul Mata, but Moskers came in '67, really changed it. And initially, when he came in, nobody knew who he was, so he had to be paired first with Pedro and then Pepper Gomez in tag matches to get him over so people would pay attention to what he was doing, this state-of-the-art flying. And for anybody that doesn't know, Moskers was like Rey Mysterio Jr. of his day. But
Yeah.
then we kept getting more and more. El Solitario. If anybody hasn't seen, not El Solitario Jr., the kid, but Solitario Sr., who I think
Yes.
died in the 70s, mid 70s or something, after he did some New Japan fantastic tours working with Fujinami, which blew people away. And I think even Satoru Sayama had a match with Solitario. Um, Go look at footage of him. But he had this big feud. There were three promotions there. The UWA, which was the one that brought in the most gaijin,
Mm-hmm.
typically American foreigners, but other
Yep.
ones.
Yep.
And they all had different TVs. So we're seeing all these. So I was just going through my photos. The original Dr. Wagner, not Dr.
Not
Wagner Jr.,
not
the
Eho.
original,
Yeah.
no, and Angel Blanco were our America's tag champions in Los Angeles in '74, which was mind blowing because that guy was a total legend. And Santo Sr. had come in just for a couple of shots, because LaBelle was relying more and more, the audience was getting more Hispanic. So
Yeah.
we got one of the kingpins, Ray Mendoza, starting around 70, 71 for about 2 years. He'd come in whenever he had time because he was huge. He later became like a head commissioner of all of boxing and wrestling in Mexico. And his sons were all the Villanos. Everyone, the Villanos that you'd see in WCW much later in the '90s,
Yep.
those were all legends, as were the Brazos in that promotion there. And I was lucky from nearly day one when Antonio Pena, the late Antonio Pena, formed, not exactly day one, but when Ron Skolar purchased shows, once Pena had formed and taken pretty much all the great talent from CMLL, Luderoth, Paco Alonso, to form AAA in, was it 91, early
Mm.
92? Because 92 was the first LA Sports Arena show. So Ron Skolar was paying for, he called it something else, but it was basically AAA paid shows to come in regularly to the sports arena. And I
Yep.
was one of the photographers there and later took over the job doing PR. I made the programs with my text and photos. On one side, it'd be in English, on the other side in Spanish. Uh, so we were so blessed. But at the end of LaBelle's promotion, when he was kind of lost the Olympic, which a lot of people thought and had surmised or guessed or just were told by others that the LaBelle family, Eileen Eaton, the boxing Hall of Famer with their two kids, Mike and Judo Gene, owned the Olympic. No, they just rented it, leased it from the city.
Yeah.
And they kind of lost that lease to where they were bopping around different venues. Sometimes they had to cough it up for the sports arena, which was a much nicer and a better part of town by USC, the campus. And Mike's cards that last year, before he closed office, December of 1982, Vince McMahon bought all the office assets, the most famous of which, because Mike kept taping over his footage. So any of the stuff you see, like on these Legends A&E things where Andre's doing a test of strength or a tug of war, those are all filmed at our Olympic Auditorium. The last year, Mike LaBelle, before he sells the office, so the most famous artifact Vince got was the powder blue cage, the second Freddie Blassie steel cage that was used in WrestleMania 2 for Hogan Bundy.
Yeah.
And a couple of other things before they got their own cage. But anyway, so that last year, LaBelle, he was just bringing in exclusively, and I didn't appreciate at the time, all of Oscars' brothers, and then some of the later Hermanos Dinamente guys and Canek. I didn't appreciate this guy had become a total legend for UWA and then, all over the indies of Mexico and Japan. He had a zillion Japan tours. Because Mascaras wasn't coming in. Mascaras was already, starting in 75. He was the IWA Eddie Einhorn champ and never gave the belt back. So we got less and less of that. And then we got a guy from Mexico by way of Phoenix who did the Frankenstein gimmick. Have you ever seen that? It was more bizarre and ridiculous than anything that went on during Jerry Lawler and Jerry Jarrett when they were sort of having fun, like having Tommy Gilbert put on a Freddy Krueger mask and wrestle. Yeah. Actually, Russell is the real Freddy Krueger. Yeah. But they claimed this Frankenstein monster guy with lifts. He was just a guy from Mexico, Mexican wrestler, until the night an inebriated Andre the Giant tore his mask off and they had to drop the character entirely. That guy was our lead heel, the Frankenstein monster.
Yeah.
By former assassin Tom Ernesto, who was our shittiest booker ever at the very end, which I think led to the territory dying. Great wrestler, great talker and all that stuff. Partner to Jody Hamilton, the Assassins legendary 60s team, but a shitty booker. And he was the one that earlier I said was the Trojan horse the Atlanta NWA office sent in to screw with and try to finish off Andy Gunkel's upstart rival promotion in Atlanta. But we were totally blessed seeing all of these guys. And we would get British wrestlers who came from Europe, like Alex Wright's dad, Stephen Wright, who was an even greater wrestler, greater flyer than Alex was, and David Morgan came in 73. And they didn't come to LA first. They came right to Mexico first, as did Chris Adams. He did a couple of shots there in his first U.S. territory before Gene LaBelle finessed him for New Japan, and that's where the Von Erich kids saw him and brought him to Dallas, was Chris Adams.
Yeah.
So, but the lucha talent was spectacular. I just, it was just hard to, because you didn't know these names and it was like they were dropped cold. There was no video. So Connect comes in and we just don't know what this guy's history is or how incredible he is once he got in the ring. But spectacular tag team, just going back to the first guys I mentioned, the original Dr. Wagner, 1974, partnered with Angel Blanco. But we had other ones, Bengala, we had Coloso Colasetti, who was supposedly the first America's champion, but down in Mexico and South America. We just had, and so that I made a point of going and seeing UWA, CMLL, obviously all the AAA shows that Ron did. And then he flew me to Chicago and to New York for the Felt Forum AAA show where we honored Pedro Morales there. I made sure at the Chicago one we honored Bob Luce, amazing Bob Luce, who was actually the sort of figurehead promoter for Bruiser and Vern Gagne's kind of mesh of AWA and WWA.
That's right.
Bob Luce was a figurehead guy. He did office work there, but he was like the host of the TV show.
Yes, yes. The quote unquote promoter, But
Yeah,
yeah, just the figurehead. Yeah, like you
I
said. Yeah.
wanted to honor him because I was a mark for Bob Luce and
Yes.
got to do that. I think it was that we had that show, or Ron Skoller did the big AAA show at the UIC Pavilion, and then the Felt Forum, not the big Madison Square Garden, but it's the outer theater. That's where NXT has their shows. When they go to, they can't fill Madison Square Garden itself, but they're in the theater.
Yeah.
And that's
Yeah.
where, Bruno, particularly Bruno, but even Pedro, when there would be overflow, when they would sell out the monthly garden shows on that Monday, they would have on a video screen, and people would pay, obviously less to go to the Felt Forum, the theater, to watch the matches same night live,
Yeah.
uh, there through, they did quite a few Backlund ones too, but
Yeah.
Backlund's case, Bruno and Pedro could just whoever they were facing, that was enough to get a sellout, 22,000 at the Garden,
That's right.
MSG.
That's right.
Backlund sometimes didn't, and that's why you saw during Backlund's tenure they had to, and no knock against him, he was a spectacular champion, but they had to really oomph up the undercard, and that's where you see Morocco and Snuka and amazing undercards underneath Backlund main events.
Right. Yeah. Well, okay, Mike, we're going to wrap down here because you and I think we could talk for hours, and I think we're going to have you on again because there's so much other stuff that I'd
Do me
love
a
to
favor,
do.
if you can get Jerry, I would like to talk to him. It's one of the
I
very few I've never ever met or talked to.
Sure, I could absolutely make that happen. But yeah, I have lots more that I would love to talk to you about. But we'll revisit sometime and have a second part with Dr. Mike Lano. So tell me, right? You talked though. Let's wrap this down. You're still doing a lot of writing, a lot of reviews. You talked about right. You have shows you're doing. Open the door here for my listeners. How can they, if they want to hear more or read more from Dr. Mike, where can they go to see that and hear that?
Well, in a couple hours, I'm doing my show with Evan Ginsberg. He and I did an actual AM, FM syndicated radio show, Legends, for years, where he'd provide a lot of great musical guests. I got comedians like Gilbert Gottfried, and like
Mm,
right after Amy Schumer was on that Comedy Central roast, and she was
yeah.
Howard Stern put her over. I had her on the week after Stern did, and then the same with the who's the blonde comic? Apologize, with the long hair, Nikki Glazer.
Yeah.
Had her
Nikki,
on
yeah.
after she did the was it the Tom Brady one where she
Mm,
killed, and I wanted to get her before I couldn't, and had her on. But I have a lot more interest, because I've done photographed music concerts and comedy concerts, like Steve Martin's very first stand-up in front of human beings, apart from the Smothers Brothers, where he
yeah.
was mostly a writer and bit performer. So I like having these folks on. I had in a span of 1 month, I had Stephanie Powers from Girl from Uncle and Heart to Heart on,
Uh-huh.
who liked MMA and she'd done some MMA stuff and she remembered Andre the Giant. And then I had Vince Russo on, and I think we went 2 hours. We normally only go an hour, but it was like how you and I could probably talk forever. I had Vince on like a week later, and Mamie Van Doren, who was part of that Marilyn Monroe,
Mm,
Jane Mansfield. She was the tertiary part of that in the 50s, 60s, doing all of these so shitty. They were great and fun to watch, teen exploitation movies. And she's turned 100. And so I had her on, and
wow.
she was talking, mostly about her career, but also some wrestling. She remembered Gorgeous George and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And some other folks. So I like to keep it eclectic. I don't just want and then when Barry Blaustein passed, I talked about what an amazing human being he was, because when he first we met each other at a show, and then he hires me as a still image photographer. I didn't know about the SNL writing. He's like head writer or second in command, and then he created all of Eddie Murphy's TV bits,
Yeah.
and then all the money the Eddie Murphy movies that made money, like Nutty Professor and Coming to America and all this other stuff. I had no knowledge of that until a few weeks in, and I finally learned, oh, he'd done all of this stuff, because I would have probably been intimidated. But it's such a down to earth, wonderful human being, and boy, that was a real tough loss because you
Yeah.
had the the Michael J. Fox, Muhammad Ali, that condition, and then got cancer, pancreatic cancer.
Yeah.
Uh, but anyway, so I'll next time I'm on, I'll have because I wasn't planning on promoting anything. But Wrestling and Everything is what our show is called now. I don't know the links. I know we're on like YouTube, all the major places, Podcast Alley. I think we're
Sure.
on all that stuff.
Yeah.
And
Sure, it's easy to find if you do it, Google search, it'll probably come up.
yeah,
And
we've
again,
got
right, you're doing a lot of show reviews and stuff. Where can someone read some
well,
of that kind of stuff?
not so much for the U.S. I mean,
Gotcha. Okay.
I'm still in the credits list. Not individual photos always get credited in PWI, but I'm still after decades with PWI, with Inside the Ropes. Just had
Yeah.
some Mick Foley pictures in that, and I want to say how touched I was because um, Mick Foley, when I saw him at Barry's Celebration of Life, he had on the same dog, I think the same dog shirt and shoes as he described last Wednesday on Dynamite, but he didn't tell me that was in celebration of his beloved dog who'd passed.
Wow.
And I had a similar, very traumatic for me. My dog was over medicated at the vet's office and died in my arms there. So I would
Oh,
have so I wore a dog tie just because I'm a dog nut to
yeah.
the celebration of life, and he came up and he said something like, "Oh, we're twins," because he had a full shirt, pants, and shoes with his
No.
little pup on there. So
Yeah.
I want to apologize to your listeners. I'm not usually this interruptive and
No, no.
overly talkative, but I see
It's
a comrade in you. I know you love
it's
this stuff too. So
yeah. No, no, it's been great. I'm sure I've loved hearing your stories. I'm sure the listeners will as well. That's what I like. It's like I always say, I do less of interviews, more just it's conversational, right? Just two guys talking, exchanging stories, and discussing. And yeah, no, Mike, you've been great. And again, I definitely want to have you back on because there's so much more we can talk about.
I want to talk about more about like the history of African Americans. We had one of the most,
Yeah,
the Chief's office in Detroit was the most diverse,
yeah,
but we had perhaps the second, maybe to Atlanta. We had a great territory. If you want to talk WWA on through LaBelle and some of the great years and the lean years, or Victor Rivera, was he murdered by
yeah,
his widow or his wife rather?
yeah.
We're still trying to figure that out. I've located Al Madrill, whose wife does uh, yoga classes with my wife on Zoom.
Oh,
Al Madrill was one of those guys that wanted nothing to do with the business. The Luthez of roller derby.
yeah,
Uh, that guy, I finally tracked Charlie O'Connell down to bar he owned. This was 20 years ago. He wanted nothing to do with derby. I got him to go to some derby reunions. So I'm trying to do the same, but I'm having some pushback from Al Madrill. If any of you remember Alberto Madrill, he was a
yeah.
big deal in LA, Houston, Dallas, obviously
Texas,
Fort
yeah,
Texas.
yeah. I remember even world class. Yeah, yeah.
So I will leave you with this. Again, apologize. You can't script interrupting, so I apologize to
No,
your
no, no.
listeners for.
No apologies needed. This has been absolutely wonderful. And yeah, we will stay in touch and definitely do a part two and beyond in the future because yeah, I'd love to talk to you more. And again, this has been wonderful.
Oh,
Have
you
you?
know what? I tried to dig up. I couldn't find it at short notice because I go, oh, gee, I'm not seeing a link. Maybe David forgot about it because I haven't after I put you through all this stuff trying to get me scheduled. I was trying to find my two Ribera jackets. I was given these when I
Yeah.
went. You know, my Wally Yamaguchi, my editor. If most of you remember, he was
Uh-huh.
Kai and Tai heel manager, the chop
Yeah.
chop pee guy. Anyway, when he took me my first two times to Rivera's, both times Mr. Rivera gave me jackets. And people don't know that he also gave away patches, watches, and clock alarm calculators. This is like in
Yeah.
the 89, 90, 91, 92.
Yeah.
I always
Again,
got
oh,
gimmicks there. I
so much
recommend
more we
going
can
to
talk about.
Japan to everyone. Learn Japanese culture.
Yeah.
Go there. Obviously, you're going to love the wrestling, but you're going to be blown away by how beautiful Japan is.
Sure.
That's my big story for today. The first
There you
time I
go.
went, they told me, leave your camera case, leave it open in the dressing room at Krakowan. Go shoot ringside, come back, nothing will be touched, and nothing was.
Yeah.
You try
Oh.
doing that anywhere in the US, like at the Oakland Coliseum, and shit's going to be
Yeah.
stolen.
No kidding. All right. Well, thank you again for your time, Mike. And again, we will stay in touch because yeah, we've got to do further installments. There's so much more we can talk about.
Combate kudasai. Domo arigatou gozaimashite.
Hey, thank you. We'll talk to you soon, Mike. Stay in touch.
Thanks, everybody.
All right. Thank you, sir.
Available on all streaming platforms. It's professional wrestling's greatest, largest, privately owned wrestling library. All the classic hits, flips, slams, and pins of yesteryear are on one place. It's Ultimate Classic Wrestling. Check out the Nature Boy Ric Flair, Hulk Hogan, Mr. USA Tony Atlas, Tito Santana, Rick Martel, a who's who of professional wrestling's greatest spotlight stars ever to grace the squared circle, all in one place. Grab the best seat in the house for memories and mayhem on Ultimate Classic Wrestling.
Hey guys, Ray Russell here. Lots of new stuff happening here at WrestleCopia. If you haven't checked out our website at WrestleCopia.com, it's a great way to keep up with the latest episodes of all of your favorite Copia programming, from the Wrestling Memory Grenade to Regional Wrestling with the Territory Talk, the Wrestling Stoop with the legendary Bob Roop, and of course all of those programs also available at your favorite podcast streaming platforms. And if you want to stay up to date with everything going on in the Copia world, all the latest news, random thoughts, fun videos, pictures, and more, make sure to join the more than 33,000 followers over at Facebook.com/Wrestling Grenade. Don't be left out. And last but definitely not least, it's what keeps the entire machine going. I'm talking about Patreon.com/WrestleCopia. We appreciate your support in helping us pay the bills to keep the WrestleCopia podcast network running and enabling us to continue to bring you all the quality programming that we offer.
All right, and thank you to Mike for coming on. Everyone, go look him up and listen, watch, and follow everything he does. You'll have a very good time and enjoy the history lesson in the process. Guys, follow me on social media. I'm on pretty much any platform. Just look up Nostalgic Dave Dynasty or at The Dave Dynasty. And between one of those two, you'll find me on all the platforms. Also, be sure to subscribe to me on YouTube for lots of classic wrestling content, plus all of my various podcasts. Go check out all of the WrestleCopia Network podcasts. You can find the individual shows on your favorite platform, or you can visit WrestleCopia.com. Don't forget to go check out my friends at the Ultimate Classic Wrestling Library. Visit ClassicWrestling.net to sign up for your account, and then download the app on all of your smart devices. Guys, thank you for joining. Thank you for listening. Thank you to Mike Lano for coming on. We will have him back on. There's so much more I could talk to him about. Such a good time. And guys, just remember, wherever you go and whatever you do, be good, be safe, and always keep on growing.
Fans, we brought you All-Star Championship Wrestling. This is Sam Maneker thanking you for being with us and saying until next time, so long everyone.